Okay, now you can say what you just said.
Hooray! Welcome, welcome. So we have our repository up for meeting notes. So if you go to the Salt-Extensions organization in GitHub, there is a community repository, and that's where the meeting notes will be living. And there's also links to the YouTube recordings on those meeting notes, so you can get the gist of things in text, and then also see our lovely faces and hear our lovely voices on the YouTubes. Last time we had a lot of great discussion. We did not get a chance to talk much about specific modules that were slated to be living in the core, the core extended, which is sort of like the extensions for Salt that the core team will be maintaining, and then the community extensions. Modules are going to be shaking out into one of those three categories. So if anybody has reviewed those lists and thinks that things should live in different places than they're currently slated, definitely provide feedback, either through this forum or it looks like right now there is a pull request open in the Salt repository that is PR number 65971, the Great Module Migration. And that is probably a good place to sort of have that discussion as well, about the rationale being used to separate modules into those different categories. Does anybody who has joined today have any concerns or ideas about that separation? Cool.
You're aware of the Great Module Migration repo also, right?
Yeah. I'm thinking that, I don't know, is that being kept up to date as things might change in the pull request, or was it the starting point for the pull request?
Yeah, so the most recent PR was merged yesterday, and it was the latest changes to that PR that you referenced in Salt. So
Okay,
he's
so
trying to
they're
mirror those. He's trying to keep that current with what
cool.
we're doing.
Awesome. Yeah, if it's being kept in sync, that's great. The Great Module Migration repository, Alyssa put it in the chat, but it's in the SaltStack org, and it's just great dash module dash migration. So you take a look there as well.
Yeah, and I would say, so as you know, in a couple of hours we have open hour. And Chunga specifically gave some time to Nick to talk about anything that comes out of this group that they want to share with the core team, because we're all rooting for this group's success. So this is a great chance to mention anything that you want us to bring up in open hour and highlight as part of that discussion too.
Yeah, absolutely. We can use this as sort of like a scrum of scrums, right? If anything, if you're unable to attend open hour, if there's anything that you want me to raise in there, I can certainly do that.
I posted a couple of suggestions in the initial purge of community extensions pull request. Not that I need all of these modules, but some of them might be better kept in core. For example, there are some modules that belong to Debian, apt pkg, debconf module. Not sure why they are being removed.
Can you say the names of those one more time just so I can capture them?
They are in the pull request. I will send the link.
Sure, that sounds good.
Yeah, we talked about this yesterday in the core team, and we agreed there are a couple of these that might be good to keep in core. I think the SQLite we were
Yeah,
going to keep.
SQLite is quite often used, especially SDB. And also, like if it was me, maybe rsync would be also useful. Quite common.
Right. Now that one I don't remember if we thought we were going to keep that one. What is apt package? Was that for creating packages, or is that just the apt?
Apt package has only one state function. I don't remember whether it's execution or state module, but it's has only one function that is named hold or held.
So that may be
to
one where we
put
missed,
package
where
in
we
on-
maybe
it
one where we
might
missed.
be, maybe it makes sense to consolidate it with other modules.
Yeah, we may have missed
Just
the state with the module, like we kept the module but moved the state. I mean, we're trying to catch all those. I think a couple of the, like the command YAML, the command JSON for pillar, we thought we would keep. But the feeling was that if these work as extension modules, then they wouldn't need to be core modules. But the issue was brought up that maybe this is a new install, or we're trying to bootstrap it, and we want to have certain things there for our orchestration. And so I get it. And then you posed a valid question: what's the process of getting them back into core? And I think that was the thought, was that if they're working as a salt extension, then they may not need to be in core.
Well, that kind of for me raises the question that I raised to the team a little while ago, which is we kind of need some clear definitions of how the decision was made, even if it's just like broad. We need at least like some sort of definitions about why some belong in this category versus this one versus this one. Even if they're just broad guidelines, I think it would help to articulate those so that the rationale is a little bit more clear.
Yeah, the way it feels right now, and there's no evidence to support this, right? But like the core is being kept small as possible, right? Like all of the like absolutely necessary pieces to get some basic things happening. And anything that might be needed for like early bootstrap capabilities and things like that. Things that fall into core maintained extensions seem like pieces of code that might be used internally within Broadcom, or core capabilities of products that they want to maintain the code. I don't know. I want to say like code quality and security, right? But like that's not to say that community maintained extensions can't also have that. But just want to keep tight reins on it, and then anything else sort of falls to community. But that's just my anecdotal feelings about the subject.
You feel like that tracks, Shane?
Yeah, no, that sounds about right. I mean, it's basically what forces the issue is how small our team is now, and we just can't maintain the size of the repo, and then the length, how long it takes for tests to run. I mean, It's so hard to get a PR in, you know. So we're trying to streamline as much of that as well.
Makes sense. Yeah. Okay, I feel like this is a dumb question, but I haven't wrapped my head around once all of the extensions get moved out, or because it's a substantial portion of the code base. Like if I understand correctly, I've heard numbers like only 30% of the existing code base will remain as core, and then an additional like 20% on top of that will be core extensions, with 50% being like these are rough back of the napkin estimates. Please don't quote me on this, but sounds like that's kind of roughly how the numbers are shaking out or something like that. The question in my mind is how, so if a customer wants or customer or salt user or anyone wants to use a community extension or a core extension, how do they get that into their salt code base so that it can be accessed and used in their salt states or remote execution commands or things like that? That's kind of a question I have.
Yeah, there's mechanisms to do it, right? I think there's been some discussion about having like native support for it in the Bootstrap script, right? There's currently a capability in the Bootstrap script to install system packages during Bootstrap, but as I understand it, there's no capability currently to install packages via pip, and that's kind of what would be required in order to have that Bootstrap just sort of do all the things prior. But if anybody's using custom Bootstrap scripts, they can certainly build in that capability as well. Additionally, Alyssa, you might know this. In the new user guides, do we have any sort of mention of salt extensions? Probably not, just because of the time.
I don't think so.
Yeah, so we might want to find where that's going to live, so that in one of these meetings we can sort of say like, hey, this is kind of where we want this piece of the install guide to live. Can somebody attack that? Even if it's with something simple as like, hey, these are what salt extensions are. Here's generally where they're going to live. And here's how you would pip install them as part of Bootstrap, or, after the fact, you could use salt states in order to integrate them. So something like that would be really nice to have for new folks.
Yeah. Max, I saw you came off mute. Do you have a comment?
Yes, currently there is a blocker. You cannot install more than one extension into a salt without some workarounds Nicholas posted.
That's specifically using salt pip though, correct?
Yeah, but salt pip is currently recommended as the preferred way to install something. Yeah. And also I created two issues. One is for Salt Bootstrap to basically specify a list of extensions to install, and the second one for IDEM as well. I think bootstrapping them during the installation phase would be the most convenient one. Otherwise, you have to resort to writing a salt state, and then there's dependencies, and you cannot use reactor because could be a race condition because some extensions are not installed yet, and it's too early to run a high state. So I think bootstrapping them before the minion starts would be the best option.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of folks like to have, the minions run high state as soon as they come up. So ideally, we would want to have modules there. already once the service starts.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious if anyone in the group has, well, it sounds like Max that you've tested it, but has anybody like tried really doing like installing salt extensions at scale in an environment of any kind, so that we can like validate the process and figure out where the friction points are and possible workarounds or anything that we need to kind of communicate about that installation process that we could ask for core support on or work through ourselves possibly, or document. Lots of solutions to that. But I'm just curious if we've done anything like that, or if that's something we need to do.
Well, I mean, up till just recently, there weren't that many extensions, right? So needing to install multiples of them wasn't really necessary. For a while, the only ones that were really out there were the VMware modules and then the Azure modules. But I did see the issue that Max was referencing about the blocker with salt pip. And so I took a look at it during that time, and there's some workarounds, but unfortunately the blocker in salt pip has to do with the fact that it's installing the modules into this like extra directory, and when it relocates it, the modules outside of the like core module location for the site packages, that's when it runs into issues. So near as I can tell, unless the upstream issue gets resolved, the only other thing that we could try and do as a workaround would be to have like a switch for salt pip that allows you to not install things in the extras directory. I imagine that the reason that we're targeting the extras directory is so that they survive salt package upgrades. Is that, I see Shane nodding.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So that means that like if you were to update salt, anything you install in the main path there is going to go poof. So you have to reinstall it as part of your upgrade process as well, which is tedious and terrible.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is on that one. That's a tough one.
Yeah,
I
it is
think
a
Say
tough
a couple.
one. Go ahead. Sorry.
I just
I
want to
think
say a
it might be
couple
possible.
things.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Max then Shane.
It's a bit of delay for me. Like, so basically, I looked into the relative environment tool, and I think it overrides part of the pip code, especially the target option. It might be possible to fix it in the relative environment tool without waiting for that stream, but unfortunately, I'm not familiar with that part of the code. Maybe Daniel has some ideas.
Yeah, I can't speak to that. DWAS that's his baby. But I did want to say that first of all, we do recognize that issue as a blocker, and it is our priority to have that fixed for 3008. And also, David Murphy is working on rewriting the Bootstrap script, getting rid of a lot of support for old operating systems that we don't support anymore, but also to add that ability to pass a list of salt extensions to be installed with it when it bootstraps. So we are aware of all the issues we've talked about so far.
So will Bootstrap become the primary, like almost the only way to install salt after this, like as opposed to like the pinning it to the repo or something like that? Because you're going to need your extensions in order for your jobs to work, I don't know.
No, you can still install with just the RPM or I know for Windows, I will plan on including all the, because I think Windows is being broken out into a core extension. And so I'll make sure all that stuff is bundled in to our salt package for Windows. And Mac the same way.
Interesting. Okay. Big questions for me.
Would it be possible to do the same for Windows, basically, before the system service starts, somehow make these necessary extensions available?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. So you could do it in the Bootstrap script. I could also modify the installer to accept a list of extensions and have it install those. The Nullsoft installer would be easy. The MSI installer terrifies me. So I don't.
Do we still have
I
that
don't-
community member who built that?
We
Like,
do,
is
but
he-
he's not really working on it anymore. He's kind of dropped off the radar. And we've pulled it into the Salt code base. So now it's ours to maintain. But
Why? Why did we do that? No, just kidding. Teasing.
well, it's a bunch of C# code and XML, and I don't have a good enough understanding of how MSIs are built. I can get in there and break stuff, but it's hard to fix.
You know enough to be dangerous, but it's funny. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to take us on a tangent, but I just wanted to know for my own peace of mind. Back to you, Nick, if you wanna.
Do I wanna? Let's see. Yeah, so other concerns, a good one that Max brought up was things that need to be changed wholesale across extensions. Like if an extension is relying upon another extension or functionality that lives elsewhere, right? Like now that we're fragmenting all of the code, if there's some ideal way in order to keep up with all of that refactoring across all of the extensions, just
Isn't there
go ahead.
well, an extension's it's a pip installable wheel, right? And so wouldn't it have a requirements file and you could require other extensions in that? I mean, I'm not the king of extensions, so that's why I'm here. But wouldn't that be how it worked?
Potentially, I'd have to look exactly at the reference here, but Max probably explain it better than I can.
It was more like an observation. It will be quite hard to fix it. Like the example I provided is that there was some refactoring that was necessary because of the underlying tool has changed or was deprecated, and a single pull request was able to change all the references that use that tool in one pull request. And this extension, it will take indefinite amount of time, and this will have effect of, it will be hard to upgrade Salt if you use any extensions that rely on deprecated stuff. But I don't think it can be fixed in a distributed manner.
After hearing you explain it, and looking at this example, if there was an extension for Vagrant and an extension for LXC, both of them, I guess, had hard-coded references to ifconfig as a command line utility. And so switching that over to IP or some other utility to use, there was one PR that handled all of that change. Instead, it's going to be the responsibility of each individual extension to make sure that that type of a change is integrated. Does that
Yes.
sound like, okay?
Yes. But from the user perspective, it will be worse experience, unfortunately. There is very little we can do.
Because if you happen to use two different extensions and one of them has fixed it and the other one hasn't, like there's not a whole lot you can do other than commit that change or try and bump somebody to make the change for you.
Another issue I could foresee is conflicting requirements. Like if your extension requires something that Salt also requires, but Salt bumps its version and then the extension tries to install an older version. I'm not sure how that kind of stuff is going to resolve.
Integration testing.
Yeah. We'll have to do, as Max said, integration testing with Salt in order to make sure that there's no conflicting requirements there, but it becomes a harder problem to solve with different combinations of different extensions for folks, right? So like I know in the Azure extension I pin exact versions of the Azure SDK, which is probably fine, right? Like nobody else is going to really need the Azure SDK in any of the extensions other than the Azure extension itself. But if that happens to require a specific version of some dependency and that ends up conflicting with some other extension, those are all things that can lead to dependency hell.
Yeah. I see I see the complexity of this issue. I don't have a good solution to it.
Yeah.
I've heard about this tool called StackStorm.
SpecStorm?
StackStorm?
Like Stack Overflow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Stack. Okay.
Yeah, StackStorm.
Gotcha.
And it has some concept of bundles or something like that. I'm not sure how it's done inside, but it basically every plugin contains its own virtual env. Just as an idea.
Well, that's kind of the idea behind RelEnv, right? Is that
but
we
the
got tired of
these plugins.
Interesting. I mean, my initial thoughts on it is that it's a little bit of a coordination problem, like where in order to like you need to know who the Salt extension maintainers are and have a way to communicate with them, and you need to you need to be able to like almost like say here's the versions of this dependency that Salt are using, pin it to your extension. It's almost like, I don't know, it's like kind of like how when you have version numbers for software and stuff like that, and in order to be compliant with that that version, you have to meet certain requirements. Like I don't know where I'm going with this, but you know what I mean. Like there would need to be like kind of some way to communicate out. Here's what Salt's doing. Here's how to make your extension compatible with that, and you could maybe enable different versions as a way to do that. I'm sorry, I am not good at this kind of thing. I'm just spitballing.
Well, I was thinking some sort of a manifest too, like this extension works with this version of Salt, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just a way of denoting that. I don't know if there's a way to do it so that Salt Pip could understand it, or, you know.
Maybe a single integration test in every extension that installs a supported salt version and test against it would be the first step. And the second idea, we can have a huge integration test in the community organization that install every known extension and tries to run something, or maybe just install them to see if there are some conflicts.
That's interesting. That'd be interesting to do.
Mhm.
Could there be something like the virtual function that we have that is just added to return whether that extension is compatible with salt? Could look at the Python grains and the salt grain and all of that to self-determine compatibility.
I think it could definitely be used in that way. The main question being, do we mandate that? Is that the way forward, right?
So what is the virtual function? I know looks like we're removing it, it's called test virtual. Is that the one you're talking about, or is there a different one?
I am talking about the virtual function within your execution modules that says whether to load the module or not.
Oh, Dunder virtual. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Never mind.
Dead air. Cool.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think we're all like feeling the gravity of the moment a little bit, like the gravity
Yeah.
of the problem, you know.
Well, we're just gonna have to get
Yeah.
out and build these and start seeing where the problems are,
Yeah,
and then
I
how to
think
fix
that's
them.
definitely the case.
It's not a fun way to, I mean, it's kind of like breaking things in production, which is not my favorite way to solve problems and see where the problems are, but I guess it's one way of doing things. Yeah.
Yeah. We have some extensions that are starting to solidify. I don't want to run too fast with popping all those out though, because the great module migration is a little fluid. I think we're starting to get to a point where it's shaking out, but we also don't want to spend time and energy on creating extensions for things that aren't going to be living there.
Yeah, good point.
So
I mean, even after DWAS merges in that initial PR, I imagine there will still be a little bit of shuffling around even after the fact, possibly, you know.
yeah, I don't think that we can wait that long though, right? Like
Yeah.
this, if we want to have all of the modules survive in some capability, right? Which I think is probably, I don't know, there's pros and cons to doing it that way, right? Like we could either look at the community extension list and say like, yes, these things in particular are actually used and I'm going to work on them. or we could look at the list and say all of these things need to be used, need to be moved over, right? Regardless of whether or not they're used. And so you can either let things die on the vine, or you can provide a mechanism and a framework for people to still install them without having to, undertake the task themselves. And then if changes need to be made, right, like at least there's something there and you don't have to start from scratch, right? Like, to me, say that there's a foo module, right, in salt, and it's very lightly used. If on some date it's not available anymore whatsoever, um, I think that's like a, I don't know, pros and cons, right?
Well,
It's
yeah, it feels like we would need some sort of deprecation mechanism, like some way to like know that it's lightly used, and then I mean, maybe we don't need to know that, but and then like have some sort of deprecation plan or how that happens, how it gets taken out. I don't know.
well, normally that would be the case, but that's not going to be the case here, right? Like everything's going to be gone in 3008. That's just the way that it is. So if we want to have some sort of ability for people to still use it, essentially we have to take the entirety community extension list and create frameworks for everything. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be all in individual repos. Like, um, like there's different flavors of Kubernetes modules, like kubeadm, and then there was like K8s and Kubernetes as separate modules inexplicably. Um, like I consolidated all of those into a single Kubernetes extension. And at some point, I'm going to find time to update them so they actually work, since they don't at all right now. But there are some number of things like that, right? Like consolidating. Uh, there's a few different Dell iDRAC type modules. They were all consolidated into a Dell extension. Um, if we can find efficiencies like that for a lot of the community modules, in grouping like things together, then it's not as big of a lift. But somebody's going to have to determine which things need to live together.
I think this is actually a good idea. Maybe
I
as
like it.
an intermediate measure, like have a huge extension repo with all the modules that were abandoned and not moved to a separate repo. So people will be able to install just one extension and get their modules back. And
Salt pip install saltx.abandoned.
yeah, naming matters.
Cool. Well, I think that the biggest thing right now is ensuring that the list in the Great Module Migration is correct, right?
Yeah.
Once that's firmed up, at least for the short term, we can start running full speed on extensions, and trying to carve up, who kind of owns things. I don't really see a whole lot of point in trying to do that quite yet.
Makes sense. With the remaining time that we have, I agree with you that top priority is like just solidifying the list of which modules go in which bucket is top priority, because that's kind of blocking all the other work. But in terms of for open hour today and what we want to say to the core team or what we want to bring up for discussion or communicate to them, is what should we bring up? What do we think are the biggest pain points or discussion items that we want to raise in the open hour forum?
I think Max's comment on that initial purge PR, maybe like I would mention rsync if you really want that one and justify why. Try to get DWAS buy off on it. You know what I mean?
My biggest concerns is SQLite and Debian stuff, especially Debian stuff. I use debconf in many occasions. And Debian is
Okay.
still supporting distro, so I don't think it's a...
Yeah, so I'd bring those up today if you plan on attending.
Or you can
Unfortunately, it's too late for me.
maybe pass it on to Nick and he can communicate it on your behalf.
Is there any in your list that, I guess, is your list nice to haves and must haves, or is it all must haves?
Mostly nice to haves.
Okay. Is
Did
there
you
any?
list your
Basically, I looked through the list and spotted some modules that looked like they might be useful in the core. So it's not a strict requirement.
Okay. Is there any on your
It's
list that
more to
are
reconsider or review it second time.
Is there any on your list that are a higher priority or closer to a must-have?
I listed them at the top in my comment. So it's basically, let me check.
SQLite,
The SQLite,
package.
Matrixlore, package runner, apt-pkg, debconf, rsync.
Okay.
So I got the list up now and I'm editing your comments. So which ones would be must-haves for you?
It was the ones in parentheses in the first sentence there.
Oh, SQLite, NACL. So I don't think we're going to do NACL. I don't think when we drop support for NACL in Salt. You still use NACL?
I've seen that in a couple of places. Personally,
Yeah.
I don't use them, but I've seen that in some installations.
Okay, what's package runner?
But it's not a hill I'm willing to die.
And you want this one? What was the other one?
Yeah, anything
package
that
dev.
package related. Debian, apt-pkg, debconf. Not sure if anyone uses kernel pkg.
Don't even
Is
know
it?
what it is. You wanted rsync too, right?
Rsync. From SQLite, I used SDB multiple times. Quite useful.
I think those we were planning on bringing back in.
Okay.
I think we agreed on the SQLite stuff.
Yeah,
I recall
it's
from our conversation.
basically no dependencies. SQLite is built into Python, so it's not a huge, not a big moving target.
And I think we're keeping these ones already, I believe.
Yes, the list is already outdated, I think, since I posted it.
Okay.
Stale key, not sure if it's actually working, but I've seen it being recommended a couple of times in Slack. basically for people who use cloud minions and wonder how to delete the keys from the machines that no longer online. But I personally don't use it.
For something like stale key, right? Looking at it, if it were to be broken out into a module, I'm not even sure where that would live, right? Like it would have to be some sort of like generic extension because it's not technology specific.
Yeah, it's a key management, so I think it's not for salt cloud, it's for cloud environments where minions are up and down quite often.
Okay. I think that's the highlight. I'll bring those up today if nobody else does, or bring it up with the team.
The thin runner, is that used by Salt SSH at all? Or is that a different thin capability?
I don't know. That's why I posted it to discuss. Not sure.
Shane, do you know if the idea is to get away from having Salt SSH altogether, or like in lieu of using Heist instead?
Eventually that will be the case, but we're not talking. I don't think that's very close right now.
Okay. So
the see, I think Megan was the one working on Heist.
yeah,
She's no longer with us. It got sent over to Tyler, and now he's going to get pulled something else. So I don't see that transition happening until we get enough manpower to work on it.
Ouch.
I'm not going to switch to Heist until it supports masterless.
Talking out loud, I don't think that our Broadcom customers know about Salt extensions and are aware of this. Like I just feel like before the Salt team makes these changes, we at least want to connect with our professional services organizations and get a better understanding of the impacts of these lists. I'm just talking out loud for on behalf of Broadcom's customers, the ones who pay our salaries. So I'll probably follow up on that because it's got me concerned. Hey, I think I've set a record for most I take notes on like 3x5 cards. It's just my way. And I think I've set a record for the most like notes I've taken in a single meeting with like 5 cards. So plenty to think about. What else do you want to bring up in open hour?
I have something, maybe not to discuss today, but more like to plant some seeds for the next meeting. I spent some time thinking on the various problems that this transition from monolithic salt to extensions brings. What do you think if we would be able to keep the centralized documentation as it is now?
Yeah, that's another problem.
Imagine that every module. I'm not speaking about how to implement that. That would be a different topic to discuss. But just imagine that we have the same centralized documentation, but every core or community module has some header on the top, which clearly states that it belongs to a community, has some links to the repo, to the issue tracker of that repo. Maybe we can have some badges, like GitHub badges, that state which salt version it's compatible with. maybe whether it has some test coverage, number of issues, something like that. So it will solve multiple problems. It will solve the discovery problem, so we don't have to maintain some index. And it will solve the documentation problem.
Yeah.
And probably some others as well.
I wish Derek were here to hear your suggestion. Maybe we could get him to come to the next meeting for that discussion.
Could you maybe, well, I don't know, we have we want to start using the SALT discussions. Maybe write that up in the discussion.
I will
Okay.
write something up.
If we put that on the agenda for next week or next time, I can make sure that Derek's here for that, because like Derek's the one who's really good at like thinking about the complexities of pulling documentation from different repos into common repositories.
Yes,
He'd be a
there
good
would
one
be
to
some
think through.
security. There would be some security implications of pulling
True.
the documentation from untrusted repos. But I'm pretty sure it can be solved through some automation or through some review process or through some safe documentation
Yeah.
source formats that don't require you to run anything. It will be, I think it will be low effort for Broadcom to maintain because it will be built automatically, but it will serve a lot of user demands and will keep the same documentation experience.
Or if it just
Well-
built a list with the badges like you talked about, you know.
A list is not searchable. The nice thing about the existing documentation is that you can search and find like whether a state is managed, and it's all under a single domain, so you can search, use Google search across
That's
the
what I mean.
whole docs.
The docs would search and then create a page in the docs with all the known SALT extensions and the badges for each one, what version of Python they support, tests are working, that kind of stuff.
This is what currently is done on extensions.saltproject.io. There is an index page that Pedro built, I think. But
I would
it's
wonder-
not getting
I'd have to-
getting updated.
I'd have to think about how we would add that metadata to module files. Like, how do we add the badge metadata and the SALT version metadata, like so that it could compile that into the documentation. I don't know how to do that. I'm sure it's possible, but I don't know how to add that kind of metadata and have it compile and in Sphinx and stuff like that.
Anything's possible.
Yeah, I would think so, but I just don't know how at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, that extensions thing's like 2 years old. Hasn't been updated in over 2 years.
That's comforting. No, it's just kidding. Quick question before we close. I for posing this for the group. I have like, believe it or not, this is not the only open source community I contribute to. And I'm a major core maintainer of another project that I'm now having meetings on Thursdays on the second and fourth Thursday. And I was wondering if we would be cool with making these meetings on the first and third Thursday. So like that would mean if there's a fifth Thursday, like there is for this month because of leap day, that we would so we would have the next meeting not in 2 weeks but in 3 weeks from now, because we would skip the fifth Thursday. Would everybody be okay with that? Like, it would sure help my schedule not be so crunchy packed. If we do SALT extensions working group meetings on the first and third Thursday, would that be okay? What does everybody think about that? No objections?
I'm fine with it.
Unopinionated.
Okay, sounds good. All right. I'll implement that if everybody's okay with that. It would just make my life a little easier.
Make sure to
We'll all
put it in
cater
the
to you.
notes. Yeah, make sure to put it in the notes like that.
Okay.
It makes Alyssa's life easier.
Makes my life easier. Thanks, everybody.
We'll all do what you want to do.
Well,
so that I can contribute to my other open source. I stretch myself too thin sometimes, but I really enjoy it.
I know what that's like.
I'm sure you do.
Thanks everybody for joining up today. We're at the end of our time. I'll see some of you at open hour today, and otherwise we will meet next whenever Alyssa wants us to.
Whenever it would be in 3 weeks if I have my way. Anyway, all right. You can all enjoy Leap Day by sleeping in. I don't know. We're leaving work early if you're in a man. All right. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you. See ya.